Hi, everyone. I am Meg Savage. I am a co-founder of Feed Forward, which is a food impact agency that specializes in solutions that align technology and innovation with the needs of our communities. And today we're going to be talking about just that, specifically when it comes to food insecurity. So I'd like to take a minute to introduce all the amazing panelists that we have here that are part of our quote unquote feed forward family. So I would love to start off by having a quick hello to Senator Biaggi from the state of New York.
Hi, Meg, and hi, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. I'm State Senator Alessandra Biaggi, and I represent Westchester County and the Bronx, namely the South Bronx, which has historically had an incredible, unfortunate amount of food insecurity, and yet at the same time also an incredible insurgence of activism around it. And so we have seen really just a community effort around wanting to solve for this problem and actually solving for it, not just talking about it, doing the work and like putting the policies in place. So I'm very excited to be here to have this conversation. And I'm sitting right in front of my hydroponic farm at home where I actually grow all of my lettuce and vegetables. So I thought that was a cool thing to show everybody today.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Okay, cool. So a quick hello also to Ezekiel from US Hunger.
Hello.
Hey, hey.
Good to be with you
I love
all.
this like split screen and the intro is very cool.
Hello, Senator. Yeah, it's good to be with you. Excited about the conversation today. This should be a lot of fun, very informative, and certainly this unlikely alliance with so many different concerns and competencies. But hopefully, we can make a difference for people who are out there who really do need help, and they don't have a voice. And so it's very good to be with you.
Awesome. And how about Mark Kaplan from Invisible and Whole Chain? There
Hi,
he is.
everybody.
Hey, Mark.
It's great to be on the panel. Thank you for including me. I'm looking forward to sharing our work in traceability and sustainable food systems and how we can leverage our technologies on traceability to help solve food waste and get food from where it exists to where it's needed with full visibility, and sharing some case studies on how we did this during COVID.
Awesome. And we do have one more panelist. We're waiting on Latoya Meters from Collective Fair. We will get started. I think she's having a little tech issue, but we can get started. And once Latoya is here, we'll hop her in. So first and foremost, one of the reasons that Feed Forward was even created was out of the work of COVID. My founders and myself, Winston Chu, Liz Peralta Foxwell, and myself, we all come from different walks of life. I personally have a media background and then really got into food innovation when I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. Liz fought food insecurity and was food insecure earlier in her childhood and has been an advocate for getting the right resources and really is thinks strongly about getting the right, using technology and getting that in the hands of community to just help others. And Winston is a chef by trade, but he actually was an actuary as well. And the three of us all came together during COVID. We were doing work with a nonprofit, and we were able to be on the front lines to fight food insecurity. And that's where we've met a lot of the people you see today, like Senator Biaggi. But we realized during that time that we could all be doing better, and that there is so much tech and innovation out there that if it had been utilized sooner, we would have been able to walk through or get through COVID a lot easier, and definitely be able to plan and strategize around that much more easy. So we definitely want to step into that. And I would love for Senator Biaggi, if you could take a minute or two just to discuss the impact that COVID had on you and your community and how that pertained to food insecurity as well.
Sure. And again, I think that the moment for me when I think probably learned the most was the moment when we really hit a crisis point. And the crisis point was not necessarily in March of 2020 or even April of 2020. It really was before, but a lot of us didn't see it because, again, as I mentioned, I represent the Bronx. We know that food insecurity is a huge problem, has been a huge problem. It's why every year in our budget in March, we make sure that there are line items to fund things like food pantries and non-for-profits and the Nourish New York program, which I'm sure we'll get to later. But what started to be really clear for me was that I represent a district of 330,000 people, and I could not access all of the people in my district in a way that was in real time. It sounds almost silly because we have email, but we didn't have everybody's email. And so that was a really scary moment, but it was also a moment that put me into action, because anytime that I think I've seen a problem, the only way that I have been able to actually do something about it is just to start. And it sounds so silly and almost so trite, but it's really not, because it was a very paralyzing moment. So I just want to run through a few quick things. I know I only have a minute to talk.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. In the Bronx, which again, I'm going to probably say that word a million times today because it is something that it's a place that is important to me, but it's also the place I want to center in this conversation. So according to a report from Hunger Free America that was done in 2020, 1 in 5 residents in the Bronx is experiencing food insecurity. And so this included 30.5% of all children, 15% of working adults, and more than 20% of older residents ages 60 plus. In fact, that last category was the category that was the hardest to reach for many different reasons, but was also, unfortunately, most lethally impacted by that. Statewide in New York, 2.1 million state residents, including 15% of all children and 7% of all working adults, lived in food insecure homes from 2016 to 2018. In New York State, in a state that has as much wealth and as much opportunity and as much food as we do, that number is stark and something that we are obviously here to talk about and work on. Food insecurity and hunger skyrocketed through the pandemic. I'll just give you one anecdote. I represent also a part of the East Bronx. And so Throgs Neck, New York, historically, steadily middle class. You have one school, PS 72, where perhaps on a regular day before the pandemic, maybe you have 125 families coming for, breakfast and lunch. After the pandemic began, you had in line 600 families every single day. We know why. There were people losing their jobs, unable to afford food. Stay-at-home orders cut off a lot of pathways to access food in the community. People really had to choose between their sense of safety and whether or not they were going to go access or get food. In addition to this, I think that it's important just to end my comment here that there is and continues to be and will continue to be until we solve for this a particular concern for Black and Brown communities, older New Yorkers, and also children specifically. It made it really clear, I think, to all of us that these Band-Aids, just throwing more money, is not going to solve for this issue. And so even though emergency food assistance was critical in combating food insecurity during the pandemic, we cannot depend on that long term. And we have to maximize our investment in nutritional programs at every level of government to make sure that everybody has access to benefits like SNAP, and really focus our attention on the fact that there is enough food for everybody, and that our systems are the places where we have to focus to make sure the food actually gets from point A to point B and feeds everybody on a daily basis.
Totally agree, Senator. If I believe we might have Winston now. I'm not sure if he can be plugged in. Great. If not, I'll take the comment that I know he was about to say. We got Latoya. I'll take that too. So Latoya, before we introduce Winston, I would love for you to say a quick hello to everyone, and then I would love your comments on the impact COVID had on food insecurity, or in your opinion, especially with the work that you do and the Brownsville community.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. as what Meg was saying, we are in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn. If anybody knows anything about that section of New York, it has been slated as a food desert, little to no food as far as viable restaurants or viable supermarkets and everything, few and far in between. Not like the mecca of like downtown Brooklyn or even Manhattan. But my partner and I, we've been working in Brownsville for actually the last 6 years, working along with various nonprofit organizations for culinary education as well as access to food. And during COVID, we had such foresight. We knew that it was going to be such an issue. So we immediately pivoted our catering company and we started producing food to those in need. And then we also started putting on the displaced hospitality workers that we knew were going to be in need of a job. So we had a workforce and we had a mission to do. We ended up scaling and producing about 10,000 meals a week, as well as about 14,000 pounds of fresh produce, partnering with other various organizations such as like Feed Forward, World Central Kitchen, and everything, anyone that wanted to lend a hand. This community has been impacted far longer than COVID, and what COVID did was exacerbate every single bit of what these people have been going through. So we knew ahead of time that we had to do something. To date, we've pivoted our model back to focusing on plant-based food and for the community, and also producing fresh, affordable food, and which is why access to EBT and SNAP are so important to the communities, because there are a lot of stores that take EBT and SNAP, but then they're also not so focused on providing the best, fresh, affordable options for these communities.
Totally. Could not agree more, LaToya. And I know we're working on getting Winston in, but I can speak for the work that he and also myself had done during COVID. And one of the things that really COVID brought to light, and I mean, this is an issue that's gone on for a long time, but I think COVID really exacerbated, like LaToya said, is the opportunity to have choice, like when you are in need and food insecure. I mean, it's amazing that there are food pantries and community-based organizations where you can go up and get a meal, or groceries or whatnot. But having a dignified experience of being able to select the meal that you want, I mean, that's not typically something that happens, or even having something that's catered to, whether it's your cultural diet or actual diet for health reasons. And that is something, I mean, we unfortunately saw meals going to waste, like thousands of meals going to waste because meals that delivered weren't necessarily culturally appropriate. I think we have Winston now. Winston, is that you? Hey, okay. So Winston, we just did a quick intro, and we're also just talking about how our experiences during COVID and how that brought a lot of issues to light. So if you could just give a quick hello, just about a minute, and we'll move on to the next section.
Hey all, thank you. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I've actually been following along on the stream, but my name is Winston Chu. I'm the CEO and founder of Feed Forward. As Meg alluded to before, I am a chef by trade. Spent about a decade in the industry, and prior to that, I spent about a decade in corporate America. And just realizing how much disparity in terms of talent that's out there, most people doing this work. And I think this day and age, things have changed where we're getting more talented individuals and pools of individuals being able to access the space to do this work. And so I think, what COVID has shown us is that if we can access the resources, bring technology, but also bring the talented people that are committed to doing the work, together we can make a dent in food insecurity and really change the term and the narratives, but also the landscapes as to how we approach food insecurity and really putting the people first and the communities first. So thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to talking more about our work together.
Awesome. So yeah, I mean, I think we're all waiting to really get into the meat of this. Like, all right, let's talk about the tech. Let's talk about community and what we're going to do to make it happen. So, I mean, that's what Feed Forward lives and breathes. So I want to introduce one of our key partners, US Hunger. They are a nonprofit. They are very well versed in all of the issues that we just spoke about. And they are taking action into their own hands on the tech side. And we are very proud partners of them. And I'd love to introduce Ezekiel Brooks to go through the amazing things that are being developed, and we're going to help activate with them.
Well, thank you so much, Meg. The first thing I want to say is that it's more than just food. I think we all know that this problem is more than food. But my role is Chief Technology Officer here at U.S. Hunger. And what we did was we built a platform. COVID impacted everything. Obviously, as a nonprofit, a lot of our events were public and packing events and that sort of thing. And so when all of that dries up and the revenue goes with it, you have to get creative. So our CEO, Rick Whitted, he pivoted us from being more of a service-oriented organization to more of a data-driven organization. So in the last year, we've been working on a SaaS platform that consolidates data from all of the people we fed all over the country, just tens of thousands of them. I know the organization as a whole for the last 10 years, we've served over nearly 150 meals all over the United States and internationally as well. So I'm just going to sort of go ahead and jump in because I got a few slides here. I want to leave time for comments. What we did was we just did an analysis. In our platform, we have the ability, we can zoom in on any part of the country where we have either fed people or people have asked us for help. So in this case, Senator, this is really most of your district, District 34, I believe it is. And there's about 22 zip codes there. The red clusters represent people who have asked us for help. The green dots represent people that we have shipped boxes of fresh food to or dry goods food. So in this particular case, there's about 861 subjects. And one of the things that's very interesting about the profile of the Bronx compared to other areas of the country is it illustrates and underscores what was said in the previous session, what even's been said in this session so far about accessibility to food. So when we look at this graphic here, it's a gauge cluster that we did for the Bronx. 72.3% of the people have chronic illness of this sample group. 72%. So 3 in 4 have chronic illness, and they're usually major problems. 97.5%, virtually all of them, live in what the USDA classifies as a food desert, meaning low accessibility to fresh food more than a mile away, which can be a really serious problem. As Senator said earlier, she was mentioning seniors and children and other folks, that just exacerbates the accessibility problem. And low income census tracts. We looked down to the census tract level as well on our platform. And we found, Senator, that in your district, about 87% of the people who ask us for help, obviously that's not the profile of the entire Bronx, but of the people who ask us for help, 87.4% of them lived in low income census tracts. So some trends begin to emerge that all of us know, but I always like to say God is in the numbers, and the numbers are telling us that the people who need help the most, obviously they live in food deserts. They don't have accessibility to fresh food, maybe not as good as it should be. They're chronically ill, and probably along with food deserts, there's probably other types of deserts. It could be pharmacy deserts there. It could be hospital deserts. It could be social services deserts of different types and job trainings, because it's usually about more than food. And that's what I want to dig into now. On the next slide, you will see where we did an analysis between 2020 and 2021 of that sample group that we got out of the Bronx in our system. And you can see on the left under 2020, those top 10 chronic illnesses. They're the usual killer gang of things: hypertension, diabetes, cholesterol, arthritis, heart disease, chronic lung disease, which is a little bit different actually than the rest of the country. So that sort of points the finger at there's some environmental things going on there during COVID, maybe, I don't know, pre-COVID, during COVID. And then in 2021, something very shocking happened. And we started seeing it all over the country. We like to say that nonprofits like us, like Feed Forward and others who contact people on a daily, a weekly, or even a monthly basis, we usually can serve as canaries in the coal mine for larger medical providers and entities. In other words, we start seeing trends before they see it. By the time they see it, it's a year old. And now we're in defensive mode, as opposed to being more of an offensive posture, going on offense to attack the problem at its root. So we see already this year, Senator, as an example, in your district, obesity shot up to number 5 out of the blue. So what does that mean to us as non-medical people? It probably means that folks are stressed out in these low accessibility areas. They're probably eating chips and drinking soda. And obesity they have been diagnosed, some of them, in order for it to make this list, it means a doctor told them they have a problem with obesity. So this is self-reporting. And at first we thought this might be an anomaly in some areas, but we look nationwide, it's the same problem. It's unbelievable the collateral damage that COVID has caused from people being cooped up for years. So Senator, I'd like to ask you just real quickly, what's your initial response to what you're seeing here?
I mean, I'm shocked that it wasn't on the list before, but I'm also I think I'm a little bit dismayed, because what is really clear to me is that, and I alluded to it, but I think this is just kind of like making the point very solid for me, which is that if we don't look at the number of people who are hungry and who they are and what they're experiencing as a whole,
yes,
we just keep putting money towards programs like Nourish New York or other things, which we need money to function and feed people, but we can't just do that. We need to know about this. So, I mean, this is incredible, but it's also, it's really frightening to me. I feel very, I feel afraid, because the Bronx already has some of the worst health outcomes in the entire country, and especially the South Bronx.
Wow. Well, on this next slide, right along those lines, Senator, the applicants self-report these things to us. And as you can see here, the most common multimorbidity groupings we look at, where there's, couplets, triplets, quadruplets of illnesses, you can see at the top that you have diabetes and hypertension, followed closely by, let's zoom in on that a little. You can see this hypertension, high cholesterol, and number 3, hypertension, arthritis, inflammatory sorts of things, right? So you add inflammation to a population of people who have low accessibility, who may be older or very young. They're not eating fresh, healthy fruits and vegetables. That's a recipe for disaster in the next 2 to 3 years. And so this is the kind of thing that we look at in terms of using technology. This data gives a voice to the voiceless. And very often, when we take applications from people, they give us free-form text. We give them a free-form text area to just tell us their story. So we use machine learning and artificial intelligence and natural language processing to do sentiment analysis and some other things to get a feel for what's really going on in their own words using data. So on the next slide, I want to show you a word cloud for that particular pool of applicants in your district, Senator. Obviously, the size of the word tells you the intensity or the sentiment of how often it's mentioned. Surprisingly, I hadn't seen this one before, but help was by far, it blew away the other tags. Help, food, family, COVID, box, job, work, lost. And so when you start seeing words like that appear in the story of the applicants, it gives us a better picture as either data people or nonprofit boots on the ground or decision makers like Senator Biaggi to be able to figure out, okay, what can we anticipate that needs to happen here? Because often it takes a year or more to get things mobilized. Obviously, I'm not an expert in that area, but we all know it's very difficult sometimes to pivot on a dime. So early warning would probably be better than a reactive stance. And so that's the role that we see at US Hunger, that we see data playing. Lastly, I want to share this real quickly and then open it up for anyone's responses. On this next slide, this is an example of some of the 80,000 stories we have in our system. We did a word analysis on this one as well. And the words that appear most frequently in the population of that 861 are highlighted here. And as you can see, Melissa C. in this particular example, she mentions food quite a bit, hours, which is surprising. And when you look at that, the context around it is standing in line. So two of our pillars here we try to operate by is dignity and discretion. We ship people a Blue Apron type experience with our boxes, fresh boxes, an unboxing experience, because we've also found that if you don't treat people with dignity and discretion, meaning guarding and protecting the information, which I heard in the first session, again, very good, they will be hesitant to even ask for help. So we know that obesity is a problem. We know diabetes is a problem, hypertension. We know that many of them live in food deserts, and then to add insult to injury, accidentally, and we all have a heart to help them, but accidentally what we do is we give them things to eat that exacerbates the problem, which is why we're so excited about working with Feed Forward, because they do these just-in-time meals. And it's really what people need. And certainly with Winston being a chef and understanding the link between food and health, there's a paradigm shift. And so we're very happy to be partnering with Feed Forward and other municipalities around the country and other decision makers to try and help get them information so that they can be proactive in their response to the gap between food accessibility and health, and using technology to do that while yet giving a voice to the voiceless in a dignified manner.
Thank you so much, Ezekiel. Yes, I mean, I would love to get Senator Biaggi and LaToya your comments on, I mean, at Feed Forward, we are working with US Hunger to take this existing technology that they've built over the past year, I'm sure plus Ezekiel, but to really customize it and make it the most robust data platform it can possibly be, especially for New York. That's one of our goals with them. And then put it into implementation and have it for folks like you, Senator, to be able to use and plan around. But I would love your comments about having this type of technology, or what you feel like this could be doing for fighting food insecurity in your district. And then LaToya, I would love for your comments as well, given your authority in the Brownsville community and what that can mean for your community specifically.
I mean, I want to also thank you, Ezekiel, for doing that analysis of District 34 and
Absolutely.
the importance of it, and how just incredibly lacking government is in data approached solutions is really alarming to me. And it's something I noticed almost in the first minute of when we started our budget in 2019, my first year in the legislative session, when we went line by line and I asked so naively for the metrics of these programs that we're putting money into and how many people we're helping and is it working, and nobody really knew. And so when we're talking about this issue, I think having data as a starting point is such a transformational way to do this work, because a lot of us are making decisions based on like dirty data that hasn't been scrubbed, that's old. And so it doesn't really work. And so having this, but having it across the whole state it's a game changer. And I want to lift up something that LaToya said.
Country even, not just state, not
The
just
country,
country. Like it's great, yeah.
100%. What LaToya mentioned about plant-based diets is something that actually got me started on my real obsession with food policy and food justice and understanding what's going on, and really taking a look at when we give people access to plant-based foods, we can turn around those inflammatory diseases like diabetes and hypertension and heart disease, and the list goes on. And we've seen this in things like the China study that was done a long time ago. And really, I think what's narrative shift that needs to happen here is that the consciousness about access to food, it's not just food. Food is a form of healthcare. And so the more we do that, the more that we're better able to make these kinds of decisions for plant-based foods, and then also lift up organizations like Collective Food Works and Feed Forward, and like start to change the way that we feed people, which is incredible and necessary.
Couldn't agree more. LaToya?
Absolutely. Listen, Ezekiel, that presentation was absolutely fantastic and highlighted everything that needs to be said about the disparities that are happening in these communities. Collective Food Works has been working lock and step with Winston and Feed Forward and for quite a while. And everything that we've been doing allowed us to develop the model that we are practicing today, where, again, access to fresh foods and vegetables, access to culinary education, because Collective Food Works practices what we preach. In order to get people to understand the benefits behind food and why you need to cook them in a more nutritious manner, also, how do you leverage your SNAP and EBT dollars instead of spending it on the food, the potato chips and all of those other things? Let's create a healthy, delicious meal. Let's what they call balling on a budget. Let's show them let's talk about how to create these delicious meals. But then also remember that access is different for every single person. There are some people that need access to a prepared meal. Collective Food Works, along with our partner Collective Fairs, provides that. Some people love to cook, so we again provide them with a fresh produce bag or a meal through our More Than a Meal program with Feed Forward. Or they want to learn or gain employment opportunities, because therein lies another issue in these communities: lack of access to viable and quality jobs. So what do? We do education and training. There's a solution, and pardon me for rambling. I tend to get really passionate about this.
No, we love it, Latoya.
Access to education and training for community food systems, which is learning culinary education, how to prepare food properly, urban agriculture, to learn how to teach and learn how to grow food. Because at the end of the day, you look at many organizations in and around Brooklyn, like Brooklyn Grange, you have Aero Farms, you have Gotham Greens, that are doing these awesome vertical gardens, and one of my partners, Farm One, that are doing these awesome vertical gardens. If we were to transpose those same systems over here in these communities, one, you'd be able to create jobs. Two, you'd be able to create a sustainable food system within these communities. So there's solutions that'll get us to the next level, that'll eradicate what we call a food desert into a place that it has abundance and prosperity. But we have to work together in order to do this.
Totally. Completely agree. And I know we've been talking a lot right now, especially with US Hunger showing the overarching data capabilities, but then let's shift the conversation a little bit to the actual on the ground work and what can be doing for like the specific individual and whatnot. And at this time, I'd love to introduce my co-founder, Winston, to talk about the More Than a Meal program that we've created as a solution to a lot of the issues we've talked about, like a dignified experience, power of choice, etc. So go ahead, Winston.
Thank you, Meg. And, just alluding to the conversation that, Latoya and Senator Biaggi was having before, was in COVID really shined the light through the cracks of how much our food system and our food rescue system needs to be repaired, and not just working on it and patching it, but how do we take an antiquated model of having people lining up, spending hours and hours online through the stories that we hear through our work with US Hunger and Mark Kaplan from Invisible, is that most individuals are spending so much time on their lines where, they may be, having 4 kids with them, she may be a pregnant mother, single mother, and getting to the point where they're receiving benefits, and it's not in the shape or form that they can use. Typically, it may be, if they're lactose intolerant or they're just getting a lot of canned food. We know that we can't survive on canned food day in, day out. And maybe one of the reasons why obesity has shot up, or chronic illness, or other areas and ailments that we've seen through the year of COVID. So through our experience in trying to reduce the lines, but also bring dignity back into the experience of food that we all love and know, is to create a program using technology to streamline the process that does all the hard work. To the conversation that Karen had earlier, saying, a lot of times that we're fatigued in our communities because we're just doing what we can. But I think there's a way to use technology to streamline the process on the things that we know that can further trust and recreate trust in our community, which is locating our constituents, communicating to our constituents, organizing in a manner that doesn't necessarily require just volunteership, but using technology to pinpoint, create reservation systems, create visibility as to the options that are available in our community. If I have SNAP EBT with the new current, bill change to allow SNAP EBT to purchase hot food, where do I get the food? Which restaurants are participating in these programs like Nourish New York that fit my budget? In addition to that, how can I find the local supermarkets or farmers markets or areas where they will, participate in double SNAP dollars? So that's really important. So with our More Than a Meal program, we focus on fresh prepared meals, but also create a streamlined process for individuals to account for their day. How can I set the time where 10:30 to 11 is my window to pick up, and I know that I'm gonna show up. I know what I've chosen to eat, out of choice, conferring agency. I know where it can be accountable, but also if it doesn't work, I can also change up and make sure that there's other participating local markets where I can pick up from. The program, it really places the people and food first rather than as the end goal. And so it allows us to focus on the other areas of their life so that we can create opportunities. Hence, it is called More Than a Meal. We work with Collective Food Works to increase access to education, food education. We'll work with Invisible, where we're streamlining blockchain-backed technology products such as fresh salmon into these meal programs. And then, I'll work with, U.S. Hunger and More Than Meal allows us to not only focus on giving the meals, but focusing on the stories. How else can we help? And in conjunction with the work with elected officials to say, this is how we need to create bills to be for the people rather than against. Break down the barriers to access, and things that we know, Senator, you've been an advocate of creating healthier options in vending machines in the past, and those are things that we can use and gather out access of data technology to really be for the people.
Thank you, Winston. And for those that aren't familiar with the More Than a Meal program, I know majority of the folks right here obviously all of us are, but just for the folks listening, I just wanted to simplify it a little bit just in terms of the role of technology in More Than a Meal. So what More Than a Meal does is matches food insecure individuals with nourishment from within their own communities. So hypothetically speaking, if you were to food insecure and to register, you could be matched with a meal from a local restaurant in your community or groceries from a grocery store in your community, which is therefore allowing a more dignified experience. And it's time saving. You're not traveling and waiting on a pantry line. It's offering the dignity of choice. And we know what comes with choice. The health constrictions are lifted. The cultural restrictions are lifted. So it's really checking the box in a lot of the issues that we saw arise during COVID. And Latoya, I'd love for you to just discuss how, with your health programming and you as one of our lead partners here, actually working with the More Than a Meal program and serving meals on a daily basis. I'd love to just hear your insights on being involved with the program and also how it is correlating to your own health programming.
The program, More Than a Meal program, it is quite amazing. It is exactly what we need during this time. From actually growing up and having to been on a food pantry and waiting, and not when you get a mystery box, not knowing what you're going to get, it's disrespectful. And it's also not healthy and it's not nutritious. My family, several members of my family have diabetes, and it was always something I had to grow up wondering if I was going to get. But again, through proper eating and proper diet and understanding education about surrounding food, I was able to stave off diabetes from my family. Now, a lot of people in our communities do not have that ability. They don't know. And the More Than a Meal program has been able to give people access in a dignified way. You get to literally walk into a restaurant, scan a code, get a fresh, delicious meal that's nutritious, with respect and dignity. And if you come to Collective Food Works, you're getting a produce bag as well. And so it's not a mystery bag. It's not something that you don't know where it's come from. If you play around with us, you're going to end up meeting the farmer that grew the food too. So it's a different way of looking how to be able to access food. Collective Food Works has also partnered with several hospitals, such as Gotham Health, Wells Cornell, because we have taken the More Than a Meal program and the food that we produce for that program, and also those are medically tailored meals for diabetes, hypertension, and also we work with oncology clinics as well. So taking back the power that we have as culinarians and chefs to really start to and make changes in our community surrounding food. Listen, I love to eat. I love to go out, but as a chef, really to sit around and be in a fine dining restaurant and seeing that how our communities are impacted. I can't sit down and enjoy my steak dinner until I know everybody's okay. So let's make the changes that we need to do now.
Meg, I think you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Latoya. We are running short on time, so I want to introduce the one and only Mark Kaplan while we still have a couple of more minutes. I know we are talking about technology and you guys are all listening and you haven't heard the magic tech word right now, blockchain, and that is definitely a part of this conversation. So we are partners with Invisible, and we are bringing blockchain-backed products to supermarkets that allow for higher quality, more affordable, and more importantly, traceable. So I'd love for Mark to talk a little bit about Invisible and our work with you.
Sure. Thanks, Meg. And I'll be quick here. So skipping preamble, essentially, we do fully traceable food for retail. Our program with Feed Forward is focused on a circularity model where a percentage of sales is then reinvested into the More Than a Meal program as a basis. But fundamentally, traceability supports food security in two key ways. And I'll tie it back to what's already been discussed. So we talk about bringing people freshness. Well, the definition of fresh is very fungible. In seafood, it can be out of the ocean for 11 days. I personally wouldn't eat 11-day-old fish. That's really driven by a lot of big food policy and lobbying and shenanigans, broadly speaking. So we define it as what someone is willing to eat, namely ourselves. But traceability enables efficiency, freshness, safety, and quality assurance. So we use everything from biometric scanners to test the freshness of the fish at source. Satellite monitoring and sensors across the supply chains are also being put in place. On affordability, we operate a price transparent model as well. So combining transparency with traceability, you're able to reveal some of the offensive margins that were referred to in the previous session, really been taken by the top 5 executives in big food companies. So, some of the most insecure people in the world are farmers, which is somewhat paradoxical if you think about it. And then, so we also are bringing forward specifications on products that are more compatible for lower income communities. So we work heavily in seafood, so I'll use that as an example. Taking a center cut salmon portion out of a fish that has a yield of, 65% of the raw material, and the animal would be edible. But a lot of it goes to waste. So what we're doing is we're taking secondary cuts to create product lines that further reduce cost because of the expectations from mass market retail for only using center cut portions. We're using trimmings for prepared meals that we're partnering with Feed Forward on. We're looking at formulating those into medically tailored meals. Seafood's very good from an omega-3 standpoint. And those types of innovations that are enabled by technology ultimately result in physical world benefits. Then speaking to some of the other topics in terms of affordability and access to this technology, I'll give ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back in that we won the FDA award for low to no cost traceability. Our goal
is a huge deal. Huge deal. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. It felt very good, not just for like the obvious accolade, but because we specifically intended this to not be a a version of big tech with some greenwash put on it. It's intended to be built from the producer forward, hence the name whole chain of the technology. And we also partnered with MasterCard as our blockchain partner, not some cryptocurrency system with volatility at the base, trying to teach producers how to redeem tokens and other nonsense like that. So MasterCard has two key benefits beyond the somewhat commodity track and trace. We're able to do digital payments to source, so we can do verification of equitable compensation. I know that even in food insecure communities, that cultural relevance and connection to where the food comes from is critical. And so part of what we do is integrate storytelling into our user experience. So we have an app for farmers, a platform for enterprises, and then a consumer transparency application where they can scan a code. It tells them everything about the product, but then we integrate recipes with it as well. So there's that. And what we're doing now is we're bringing recipes from the source communities. So we're talking about Black and Brown communities. A lot of what's unfortunate is, and speaking about the food insecurity at the source, a lot of the global South basically feeds the world, and they are the most insecure. So by making this connection, we're hoping to have equitable food systems on an end-to-end basis. So I'll stop there for Q&A if it's
awesome. Yeah, just to like bring this in together, I just like how this relates even to the work that we are doing with LaToya, Senator Biaggi, U.S. Hunger. I mean, what Mark is doing at Invisible is getting this food in, and everyday Americans going to a grocery store can purchase this seafood, and it's going to be other items as well. And just by purchasing this awesome top quality stuff, you're also giving back to your community and feeding your community in need via our More Than a Meal program. So it really is a full circle type of experience. And it really just shows you how community and technology can work together to really make it happen. And we're excited for what's to come in 2022. So with that, yeah, go ahead. If there's a Q&A or anything like that, we're here, but I know we're up on time.
I'll just volunteer. Our vision is to really connect our traceability with U.S. Hunger's platform to provide that complete end-to-end visibility.
Okay, so I don't think we have time for a Q&A, I am hearing, but if anyone is interested in any of the work that we are talking about, or if you want to get involved or even donate to More Than a Meal, we can put you in touch with any of our partners here on this that you see on your screen, but please visit Feed Forward, that is FWD.com, feedfwd.com, and reach out to us, connect with us on LinkedIn, whatever. We would love to hear from all of you. And thank you so much for listening today. And thank you to all of our panelists.
Thank you. It was great.
Bye, guys.